10 question with Sasha LaPointe. Sasha is a writer, poet, performer, singer, and a former member of Medusa Stare. Question number 1. How are things going on in Seattle with the Black Lives Matter protests?
I think that I can only speak as an outsider, as a supporter in this movement. I'm not directly involved with the organizers. I'm just attending and I'm supporting. And I think that if people are interested in what's happening out here, I would encourage them to follow folks like Nikita Oliver, follow pages like Defund SPD, to get more information, to figure out where to show up and how to help. The marches and the rallies that I've attended have been like hugely like well attended, and there seems to be a lot of folks, you know, working together, working as a community to be seen and heard in this movement. I mean, just last Friday there were 60,000 folks in Seattle for the march, and that's really beautiful. And but yeah, again, I would just encourage folks to follow pages like Nikita Oliver and Defund SPD to really follow and see more about the details of what's going on.
Question number 2. Can you tell us about the autonomous zone in Seattle? What is going on there and what kind of events are they holding?
Yeah, again, I can only speak to the events that I've personally attended and have been present for. I think that the media wants to spin it a certain way. I think it's easy for the media to make this look scary, to make this look like something it's not. I mean, it's about sharing information. Folks are occupying the space and they're holding gatherings and getting educated. They're showing films, they're sharing food, they're having conversations, you know. The first attempt that I attended at the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or Chaz, a young Tulalip woman spoke up about police brutality in the Native community and about how she lost her father, how he was murdered by the police up near Tulalip, and the crowd cried with her and they said his name, they showed up for her, and it was really moving. And that same night, Nikita Oliver spoke out about the purpose of Chaz, and she spoke out about how the movement really isn't just about that space, and that people shouldn't forget the vision or the end goal, because it's not just about being at Chaz. It's about, you know, she said, dismantling oppression and white supremacy. It's about disbanding the police, and that space is about getting educated and getting radicalized. It's not just about showing up to party at Chaz, you know, but to find out where to go, where to get information, how you can show up to things like city council meetings and really help. And that's really what that space is about. And it's been pretty amazing to see folks showing up in that way.
Question number 3. Can you tell us about your Native American heritage and how has that shaped you today?
Yeah, so I'm Coast Salish from the Upper Skagit and Nooksack Indian tribes. The Puget Sound area is our ancestral home. And I think that it's shaped me in the way that it has inherently made me an activist. As an Indigenous woman, existing in colonized spaces constantly, you know, my whole life, I watched my great-grandmother dedicate her entire life to the preservation of our Indigenous language, a language called Lushootseed. I watched her work with linguists to transcribe and preserve it. It was literally becoming erased by colonization, by white settlers, by the English language. And so in her early years, she went around with a tape recorder to her elders, the last fluent speaking Lushootseed elders, and she recorded their stories. And I mean, that was her way of saving her culture, of preserving a traditional language. That was activism. You know, I grew up seeing that. And I think because of her, she was also a storyteller. And I know that's absolutely shaped why I do what I do as a poet, as a sort of contemporary storyteller. In fact, just the other day at Chaz, there was a really, really important event, a bunch of Native folks showed up and gathered right in front of the precinct, and they shared songs and stories. One of the first speakers, he was with a group called Protectors of the Salish Sea. He came up and he introduced himself, and before he started the song, he introduced himself and what tribe he was from, but then he took the moment to honor the work that my great-grandmother did. And he spoke a little bit of Lushootseed, and it was just really beautiful to hear our language again. That's part of me, you know, and that lineage and that fight to preserve our culture is absolutely part of me. It's why I write. I think also as an Indigenous woman, I do see how these two movements are interconnected. This idea of Native sovereignty, of Black Lives Matter, you know, we're struggling against the same kind of oppressor. We're struggling against these colonizing forces. So I think it's really important to show up and support, you know, our Black Lives Matters movement, like organizers in these events as a Native person.
Question number 4. Before the Black Lives Matter protest and COVID-19 lockdown, what were you up to? Any projects you were working on?
Yeah, I think right before lockdown hit, I was starting to play music a little bit. We'd met up a few times. It was super fun with my partner Blaine and Kari, who was in Medusa Stair. We were just meeting up and writing punk songs and playing in her basement, and that felt really cool and really fun. But then lockdown happened and we all kind of had to disband.
Question number 5. Can you tell us about being in the National Geographic magazine?
Yeah, that was a really beautiful project by my friend Kaylee Spitzer. She's Casca Dene from the British Columbia area. She's an incredible photographer. We went to school at the Institute of American Indian Arts together. And she does these huge, gorgeous tintypes, this like old school photography style. She could tell you more about that, but it was a project that she wanted to photograph and do these really big, stunning tintype portraits of her, you know, her other Indigenous artist friends. It was kind of a project about perceived Native identities, specifically those of us who are mixed heritage. And yeah, so that was why I was in National Geographic. That show actually traveled around a lot of places. It was in the Portland Art Museum. But yeah, that was a project she did about like Native identity, and yeah.
Question number 6. Do you also write articles for different magazines? If so, what are they about?
Yeah, I've been published in several places, Indian Country Today, different literary journals like Hunger Mountain. I just recently got a piece that's coming out in the Moss Journal. I've had some poems published here and there. I have 2 books coming out in 2021. One is a memoir. It's coming out with Counterpoint Press, which is actually, I think, based in the Bay Area, Berkeley, I think. But the book coming out with Counterpoint is called Red Paint, and it's a memoir. It's about growing up mixed heritage on a reservation. It's about surviving sexual violence. It's about finding an outlet in punk and like finding strength in my lineage. The other is a collection of poems called Rose Quartz, and that'll be coming out with Milkweed. So that's what I'm writing and working on.
Question number 7. Tell us about some of the poetry you read on stage during your live performance.
Most of the poems from the performances I did with Medusa Stair are actually going to be in that collection that comes out next year. And that onstage performance too was especially powerful. It was a powerful performance for me as a survivor of assault and of generational trauma. That performance was all about strength and healing. I come from a line of healers in my Coast Salish background. The red paint is something that is from our longhouse ceremonies that I won't go too much into detail about because I feel like that would be really disrespectful to share too much. But the red paint was worn by my family, by my ancestors, and I had to get permission to wear it on stage. And it was sort of indicative of the lineage I come from, that like that ability to heal. The red paint sort of represented that while I was reading on stage. And I think as a performer and a poet, and someone who grew up Indigenous and also grew up around and in punk, I think it was really important for me to be able to express that in a space like that and sort of feel seen and heard as an Indigenous speaker and poet, especially because those spaces have so historically been male and been white. So to show up that way and read those poems wearing the traditional red paint, that was really important.
Question number 8. What other activities are you involved in?
I'm part of, I don't know if folks know about the Hugo House in Seattle right now. I'm one of their emerging writers it's a fellowship they have for several other, there's a group of us emerging writers in the Seattle area, and we gather, we meet together now, obviously on things like this, like Zoom, and write together and workshop together and do readings. That's been really cool. Other than that, I'm like just constantly writing, working on poems, getting the books ready. I've also started this sort of fun lockdown project with Kari again. It's kind of just like a weird recording project with her and I. We're just kind of like pushing buttons and singing songs, and like hopefully something comes out of it. Yeah, it's just like a strange little recording project right now, but that's what I've been working on. I just miss music, I think, and playing music.
Question number 9. Tell us about activism and the punk scene in Seattle.
I think to speak to activism in the punk scene right now, in light of everything that's going on, I'm pretty stoked about how the punks are showing up, like being in the autonomous zone several times, seeing the punks actually be the ones that are not in the park partying. They're sitting cross-legged in the intersection in front of the precinct, and they're listening, and they're helping, and they're, you know, volunteering at the barricades to like keep things safe. I think that's really cool to see right now, you know.
Question number 10. Any advice on people who are dealing with anxiety and depression during the COVID-19 lockdown?
Yeah, I think that there's this, you know, I'm kind of tired of the advice, just make art, just be creative, find creative outlets. I mean, yes, if you can, absolutely do that, and more power to you. I think that that is like relevant, but also I'm tired of it in the way that like sometimes we can't, you know, sometimes sadness and anxiety around what's going on sort of hinders our ability to be creative. And I know that a lot of folks and I myself have experienced it. So I think beyond the advice of like, just make art, just like do what you can do. Like some of us can't create when we're in this like sort of like trauma response mode, and that's fair. And so to those folks, I would say, if you can't create right now, like find your community, find healers, find mental health support, just don't be alone in it right now. I think that's the most important thing, in whatever way that looks like, whether it's phone calls or like Zoom meetings, just don't be alone right now. Find your people.
Thank you very much for the interview.
Yeah, thank you.